Okay, so we already have discussed about SSH authentication. So for that, we already have created a pair of public and private key. Let me show that first. In our current user directory, in the SSH folder, we have the key pair, a private and public key. These two have already been created. Now we are going to configure. We already have seen like how when we are accessing our Git repository from the command line using this public private key pair, how can we do this, what are the different ways to do that, do this, access. We have already seen this. In the last session we also saw like how can we create a credential entry basically in Jenkins, because Jenkins also needs to authenticate to our Git repository. So Jenkins need those authentication details, right? Our username and password. So we have already created a credential entry in Jenkins here. So we have to go to the manage Jenkins, and inside the credentials we have created a credential entry, this one. See here, this is our credential entry, and in this credential entry we have defined our username of Git, and we have provided the password also, and we have provided a unique ID. And this credential entry we have used in our pipeline here. Let me go to the configure and let me just scroll down a bit once the page opens. Yeah, here we have attached that credential entry. So our Jenkins is now accessing our Git repository with the help of credentials configured in this credential entry. So this we have done for basic authentication for username password. Now today we are going to create a credential entry for authenticating with the help of public private key. So let's go inside this object, inside this job, or let me create another job. Just let's create a new one. I'll say new, and I would say Git authentication with SSH. This is the name. Let's create a freestyle project, and let's scroll down. Here we have to provide the URL of our repository. Now let me get that URL. Let me sign in my GitLab. Let me provide the credentials here. And let's get the authentication code to complete this sign-in process. Let me go to the email, and this is my code. Okay, it is not allowing me to copy paste. 256038. Okay, 256038. Let's sign in. Refresh the page. So we are in our Git account. Let me go to the DevOps repository. This is our repository, and let me get the. Now we need to get this URL, SSH URL. Okay, In the previous session we took this HTTPS because our authentication was using username and password. Now let's go here and put the URL. Let's click on apply. This is the error I was talking about yesterday. Do you see this? So it says that failed to connect to repository command, and we are getting this error 128. So what this error is? So the error says that our Jenkins doesn't have the access to the repository, and this error I was expecting yesterday also when we were doing the authentication with the help of HTTPS, but my Jenkins was taking my credentials from somewhere. That's why it was not giving us that error, but this is correct error. You can see, please make sure you have correct access rights and the repository exists. So the error is 128, and the error is because our Jenkins doesn't have the access to our repository, but obvious it is because we have not yet provided the credential. So we can create the credential entry from here also. You can simply click on add and click on this. So this Jenkins window wherein we can create the we can create the keys, we can see that window from here as well. Okay, now let me show you one more point before we go ahead with this. Let's go to the dashboard. Let me save or leave. I would leave that, and let me go here, manage Jenkins. Let me go to the credentials, and here, and let's create a domain. Now what is this domain? Let's understand. Let's say you want to access different systems from Jenkins. Let's say GitLab, GitHub, few other systems also you are accessing from the Jenkins, and you have created different credential entries to access each of those systems. Now you can basically group them together, like say I would say add domain, and I would say GitLab keys, right? I would say GitLab keys. So all the GitLab keys, all the keys, all the credentials, I would say GitLab credentials. So all the GitLab credentials I will define in this group, right? So it becomes very easy for us to manage the keys which are created to access a particular system. So all the GitHub related keys you will mention or you will group them together in another domain. So you can create, so I will say here this domain has credentials for gitlab.com. Now here you can provide a specification, host name. So I would say gitlab.com. So whenever you will put the URL, now I'll show you that now. Once we will go into the job, I will show you what it does. So let me create this and then we will talk about it. Now I have created this. Now let's go to the credentials, and here, so here we have the GitLab credentials, a different domain, a different group we have created. Now what I'll do is, let's go to the job and let me open this. Let me go to the configure. Let's scroll down, and now here we are accessing a gitlab.com, right? Some URL from gitlab.com. Now if I open this credentials entry, okay, now this credential entry will only show me those credentials which are from the from that domain which is configured for gitlab.com. I will just copy this and I'll just go there once again. Dashboard. Let me go to the credentials again. Let me go here. Let's go to just a minute. GitLab credentials, and here we need to add the credential. So we will add the credential now in this domain. Now inside this domain I am adding the credential. So we will say SSH and username, because now we want to create a credential to be able to access the Git with the help of our private key. Okay, so previously we were created this username with password. Now we are going to create SSH username with private key. So we will keep the scope as global. Now what is this? I will tell you now. The system, if you define the system as of the scope, then the credential would only be accessible to Jenkins system. Means you won't be able to use that credential in your job. In your job, if you want to use a credential now, then you won't be able to use a credential which is created with the scope system, because this is only allowed to be used by Jenkins for its own purpose, not for the purpose of the Jenkins jobs. Okay, so that's why we are creating this key or credential with the scope global. We can define, say, GitLab SSH. I would say description. So SSH key for GitLab access, I would say. Username, we have to provide our username. gmail.com. This is my username, and then we have to provide our private key. So we have to select this radio. Okay, let's go and copy the private key contents. So I'll just open this in Notepad. This is my private key. I'll just copy this, select this, copy this, and we'll come back here and I would say add, and then I'll paste my private key content. If you guys remember, at the time of creation of the public private key pair, SSH keygen asks us for passphrase, that is password. If you want to keep a password for your private key, then you can keep at the time of creation itself. So whatever the password you had entered at the time of creating the public key private key pair, that password you have to enter here in this passphrase field. But while creating this, I had not provided any passphrase. I had simply put enter and I had went on. So we don't need to provide any passphrase here. But if you have the passphrase for your public key private key pair, then you have to provide that passphrase here and say create. Now this credential has been created in this domain, GitLab domain, GitLab credentials domain. And this domain, the beauty of this is, this domain, we have configured this domain to be used, say here, let's go here and check. So we are mentioning here that we want to use the credentials from this domain only and only if we are trying to access gitlab.com. Okay, I'll just show you how it works now. Now here in our job we have the gitlab.com URL mentioned. Now if I open this, no, it should show me only that credential which is configured for gitlab.com. Let me say git@gitlab.com and save. Let me come back here. I will just go back. We'll come back into this. Yeah, this one. So just a second, it is still not showing me that credential. Just a second, let me see. It should show me this credential entry actually, this one. Let me see if I have done any mistake while defining this domain. Git lab credentials, configure domain. Let me go inside this. And yeah, this is absolutely fine. Let me just take this entire thing. Just a minute guys, I am just checking if there is any mistake in the domain. Basically it should show me that access key. Now it is not showing me that. Let me see the problem there. Where is my credential? Let me go to the scope is system. Okay, that's fine. Credential is this, and store. Okay, just a minute. Let me go to, this is a global domain which has our this credential entry. Yeah, let me create a credential entry here as well. SSH username with private key. I'll define the scope as global so that it can be accessed. SSH key from global, I would say. Username, the same username. I would say enter directly. I would say add and paste my private key. And I'll just scroll down and create. Now this is in the global credentials, right? Now let's go and check if we can see that here. Yes, now it can be seen, but we should see this entry as well. This one from the particular domain. That we are not able to see, and that is what I'm just checking. Just a minute. But we can see this SSH key from global. This is in the global domain, but the previous one we had created in our specific domain. So I just wanted to see that also. Let me go and go to the domain again. Let me go to the configure and let's not define any include. Okay, now let's go to the job Yeah, we can see this, but it looks like it is from the, okay, let me go and remove it from the global, SSH from global. So I would go here and I would delete this. Let me come back. I would say leave configure. Yeah, so it is not showing somehow the credential entry from our different domain which we had created. Yeah, let me see, there is some small mistake. GitLab credential, this is fine. Let's put gitlab.com, that's fine. And let me delete the domain and create again. Okay, and then this is the domain, and let's from here let's add the credential, SSH username with private key. Yeah, let's keep the scope of the usage global. We would say SSH from GitLab will provide username and just copy this. Yeah, and make sure that also this, do you see this, there is a after I paste the key there is a blank line, right? So we have to remove that blank line and then save the key. So this is our key now from this domain, a GitLab. Now let's go here. Let me delete this project and let's create it again. I'll say okay. Let's go down. Now here we can see now here we can see the key there. Now let's put our URL SSH and put the URL, and now I can select the credential. Now the main use of this is, now if you configure your this gitlab.com domain to be used only when you try to access gitlab.com. Now if whenever you will put a URL from, let's say, a github.com, then in this credential list the credentials from that domain will not list. It will list only the credentials from a domain which is configured to be used with gitlab.com. So by that you can manage your keys. Let's say you have 100 of credentials created and now you want to choose the one from those 100 credentials. Then it would be very difficult if it shows you the the list of 100 credentials here. But if you create a domain and you configure the domain to be used only when you are using gitlab.com. So how to configure that? So here you have to go and say GitLab URL path, or you would say based on the host name also. Let me delete this, and here you would say host name include GitLab. Okay, so when your URL's host name, now in our case, just a minute, where is our, yeah, this one. So here we have the gitlab.com, right? This is the host name. So when your host name will contain this word GitLab, then only the credentials from that particular domain would be shown to you in that dropdown. If you are trying to access github.com here, if your URL is a github.com URL, then you won't be able to see that, right? That is the main usage of this. So let me save and let's come back here. Let me go to the configure. And the credential, do you see here? I can only see the credential from the domain now. Now if I change this URL, let's say to github.com, right, with ID SSH from GitHub, that's fine. So if I change this to github.com, let's say for an example, then I will not see the credentials from the domain, this one, from this domain, because this domain I have configured only to be used when I have GitLab as a part of the host name of the URL. So this is the usage of it. You can create your credentials in different domains, different groups, and those groups also you can configure to be used only when you are trying to access a particular hosts, right? So it will not list all unnecessary keys which are not at all created to be used with a specific domain. That is the main beauty of this actually. Okay, so let me go and get this SSH and let me paste this URL here, and let's add this credential. Yeah, let me see which credential it is showing me. Just a minute. Yeah, it is gitlab.com, and let me get the other URL, https and put it here. Yeah, so it is showing me that credential. That's fine. Now let me go to the credentials again. Configure, and I will configure it based on, let me configure the specification based on, say, URL scheme. and I would say HTTPS, for example. Say HTTPS URL scheme. I'll save this and let's go to our job. Let's go to configure. Now I have HTTPS link here. Now if I open this, I can see that that credential here, because I have configured that domain to be used based on the URL scheme. URL scheme is HTTPS SSH, that is the URL scheme. Now if I define the SSH URL there, now you can see it is not showing me that other entry. When I had the HTTPS, I had two entries defined in this. One is from the global domain, which doesn't have any restrictions or any filter, and when I provide a HTTPS link, just see this one more time. Let's define this HTTPS again. HTTPS, apply, and if I open this, I can see two entries. One from the domain gitlab.com. It is showing me the credentials from this domain because I have configured this domain to be used with the URL scheme HTTPS. So whenever I would be using HTTPS URLs, I would be getting the credentials from this domain listed in the credential dropdown. That is how you can group them based on the domain names, based on the URL schemes and various other criteria. But it will help you a lot. Here it will not list the unnecessary keys in the dropdown. That is the main usage of this. Okay, now let's go to the manage Jenkins. Let's go to the manage Jenkins and let's create one more credential entry. I'll just delete this domain for now because I just wanted to show you what is the use of this. So that's why I had created this. So now I'm going to delete this and let's create all the credentials in our global domain. So there won't be any restrictions to it. But the good practice is to always create the domains, configure them either based on the host name or the URL schemes, and put your credentials in those respective domains. That is the good practice. Okay, now let me go to this and let's create a credential again, our SSH credential. Let's use this code. I would say SSH key. Let's provide a description. This key is used for GitLab. Let's provide the username d@gmail.com and let's put the key again. Let's create, and now let's go to the job. Yeah, we can see the key. Let me provide the SSH. Let me leave this and let's delete the job and we'll create a new one. So I would just simply delete this. Let's create a new one. Git SSH authentication freestyle job. Let's click on OK. let's scroll down, click on get. Now we want to provide a SSH URL. So let's go to the repository, click on clone, get this SSH URL and put it here, and let's use this. This is our deepranad@gmail.com. This key is used for GitLab. This is just we just created the SSH authentication. And let's click on apply, and here we have a main branch. Okay, host key verification failed. Okay. Just a minute. Host key verification failed, could not read from remote repository, but our key is correct. Let me just see. Let's build now and see. It is not able to access. Okay, it is giving us the access problem. Okay, let me add the key again. Yeah, this we just accessed. Update deepranad@gmail.com. This SSH. Okay, and let me replace the key again.
I think you need to remove the extra space.
Yeah, I have just kept it for just to check whether it allows me that access or not, because I had kind of tampered with it, right? But it should not create an issue with that, with removing that space. But I'm just checking it, just like why it is not giving me the access, because I have the, just a second, let me go to the configure and check whether it, no, it is still not allowing me the access. So okay, let me go and see the public key. Let's check if we are able to access from our command prompt. There could be the issue with the key itself. Let's check. So I'll say git clone, and let's check with this from the command prompt itself. It is allowing us the access from here. Okay, just a minute, let me delete that. And let's check out one more. Now it is allowing me the access from here, but it is not allowing me the access from, just a minute, git config I do not have. That's fine. So let me go to pranad.t.ssh, and I will just remove this known host. I'll just remove this config also. Remove this, and let's clone it again. Yeah, so yes, yeah, now it is we are able to clone it from using this key cusers.ssh and this is the key, right? Let me copy it. Let me go back to the credentials. Just let's save and let's go back. $128 maybe. Okay, which branch I have? Main branch, right? Correct. Um, just a second, let me just see this. Okay. It could be because it's correct though. Let me just see. Okay. First connection, manage Jenkins, configure global security. Understood. Manage Jenkins, security. And host key verification strategy, accept first connection. See. Okay, now let's go and run this. Yes, now it is successful. So basically the problem was like here we had a different strategy. I will show you that. See, in the manage Jenkins, if you scroll down and go to the security, let's scroll down. Now there are different host key verification strategies available. Let's check out those. Known host file. Known host file is this file. Known host file. So if you select this strategy, all the hosts from which are added into this file they would be they would be they would be connected. Okay, then no verification, then it will not check if the particular host is there in this known host or not. Then known manually provided keys, then no verification. If you provide this, then it will not. See here, this option is generally insecure. Host key will not be verified during SSH connection. This is what it is saying. So right now we are saying accept the first connection, because if you guys see here, when we access any particular host for very first time, then it gives us this particular authenticity of host confirmation, right? Authenticity of host confirmation it shows us, and then it asks us to confirm, and then it adds that host entry into the known host file, right? But Jenkins doesn't ask us there, and that's why it was not trusting that host there, right? So that's why we just mentioned accept the first connection. Let's click on OK, and let's go to the manage Jenkins. Let's go to the dashboard. Let's go inside this Git SSH authentication job again. Let's go to the configure. If we scroll down, and if I select this, then it will not work again, because it will say permission denied. So the authentication is working now. If you select any other credential which doesn't have the correct credential information or access information, it will give you an error. But our SSH key is working now. Apply. So it is now allowing the access, right? So let's save. Now this is how you can create the SSH key credential. So we basically understood two main points, that how can we configure the credentials in different domains instead of creating all the credentials in a single group. You can create different groups, and you can create your credential entries into it. You can configure the groups to be used based on the URL schemes or based on the host names, so that whenever you will be, say you have configured a domain to be used with HTTPS URLs, then you would be configuring all those credentials used for HTTPS in that particular domain. All SSH related credentials you will create in a different domain, which you will configure to be used with SSH. So this is how you can group the credentials, and according to the usage or according to the URL you specify in your job, only those credentials would be listed in the dropdown. So this helps us in selecting the correct credential from the list we have got there, right? Okay, so this is how we can create the credential with private key, and we can create the credential with the username and password also, right? This is what we did. Let me go to credentials again, and then we can keep these two credentials for now. We will use this one by one. Okay, now this is about the authentication with Git from the command prompts as well as from the Jenkins. Okay, now here Git SSH authentication, this is the job, and now you can check the repository is cloned in program data. Here Jenkins .jenkins. Here we have a folder called jobs. Inside this you will see the working directories for all the jobs created. Now if you go to the git SSH authentication jobs working directory, let's go here in the builds, build number 3, and here we can see that that has been cloned. Let me just go and check the console output once. Yeah, it is cloned. Yeah, okay. And which is the working directory for us? This is the working directory, you can see. This is our working directory, workspace .jenkins workspace. Okay, not here, .jenkins workspace, this one. This is the workspace directory and git SSH authentication, and here we have that repository cloned. Now we don't see the .git folder because it's hidden. If you want to see that, you can go to view, options, and let's go to the view and check this show hidden files and folders, apply and OK. So you can see the git folder, right? So this is where our git repository has been cloned, and as of now we only have readme file there. We do not have our source code yet. So we would be pushing this source code. In our next session, tomorrow's session, we will see how to now start using this git repository for collaborating the source code, right? So how can we push, how can we pull, how can we create different branches, how can we merge the branches and all that stuff, right? So we are going to see it in our next session.